Piers Morgan serves as an agent to white supremacy in this new debate on his YouTube channel. And it gets really dicey and triggering. So be warning, warning, you will be triggered. Before I even start, I want to break some things down, right? Because there's a misunderstanding between, or sort of this idea of calling out white supremacy sort of galvanizes this army of outraged people that seek to deny it and defend it. And that's actually what white supremacy was designed to do. But what is white supremacy? It is an ideology. It is not a people. White people are not inherently white supremacist. I would say that the propaganda in the world makes it that most of us have varying degrees of white supremacy in us. Yes, including myself. And it's something that you have to unlearn through education and through reading books. As we go on, I will, give you some books that you should read to educate yourself, books and documentaries, all that stuff. Now, on the matter with Piers Morgan, he is serving as an agent of white supremacy. Now, it's all about King Charles's coronation. And can I just add this little nugget here that I believe that he's on some sort of retainership with the royal family and the press office, because I don't understand why every week he has something to say about Meghan and Harry. Nobody is even talking about Meghan and Harry most of the time, but somehow Piers makes them a hot topic. What is this sick obsession with Meghan and Harry? And what do they have to do with white supremacy or racism, right? It's so much deeper than Meghan and Harry. And sure, they they showcased or they exposed their family for, their disgusting racism that they've inherited generationally. But let's get into the video. Before I give you too much information, let's get into the video. Piers Morgan, serving, being an honorable man of white supremacy and pushing their narrative.
But first, a new bombshell poll published today shows that nearly half of the King's realms would vote to become republics if they had the chance. Caribbean countries cite colonial ties as the reason for wanting to part with the monarchy. And pretty disturbingly for King Charles, 10 of the 14 countries polled say they back the Sussexes, saying Meghan's treatment exposes racist views. It's ignited debate about whether King Charles should apologise for Britain's past sins, maybe even pay reparations. Would that make any difference? Or would it just fuel the fire of republicanism? Well, here with me now to debate this, the former royal butler to Princess Diana, Paul Burrell, the activist and organiser of Black Lives Matter protests, Iman Aiton, and the historian and royal author, Dr. Tessa Dunlop. Well, this will be a quiet debate, won't it? Well, you brought your earplugs, Paul.
I won't get a look in.
Paul, let me start with you. I've got a problem with this constant looking back in history, feeling guilty for stuff that none of us in this era actually did, and then having to say sorry for everything that we didn't do, and even now, apparently having to pay people today for stuff that happened to their ancestors many generations before.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. Oh my God. This is the mastery of white supremacy, denial, deception, erasure. What did, what's his name call it? Tucker Carlson, he called it a hoax. Okay. So I think that a lot of us get distracted by the history of white supremacy and the actions in the past, with slavery, with colonization, that it blinds us, or they use it as a tool to distract us from what they're doing today, right? What they're doing today. This book, you should read this book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, right? Confessions of an Economic Hitman is about how the West uses debt traps via aid, right? Through the World Bank, the IMF, and all these organizations to, give loans to African nations. So it's like this sort of way of pretending This is what the book says. And the book was written by he called himself an economic hitman. He worked in an organization that facilitated this. So basically they give aid, right? And they actually threat. It's basically a threat. You better take aid, right? If you don't take aid, if an African leader, a South American leader doesn't take aid, guess what they do? They kill them. This is what he claims in the book, right? This is not for me. Go read the book, right? And the book, it's very interesting because he actually talks about South America primarily. And maybe he didn't do work in Africa, but it's the same system that has gone on in Africa, and you'll learn that through the book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. But okay, so they do this aid, and this aid is meant to make African nations subservient to the West, right? And there are stipulations in these contracts that say you can't develop your nation, like basically, according to some sources, right? You can't develop your nation, or you can't build factories. You can't basically build infrastructure or any of these things that will make you developed. And they specifically target countries with vast natural resources. So whereas, some countries in Asia, they were able to see an opportunity and have a win-win situation, with Africa, with South America, they sort of, leaned into their colonial clutches and said, no, we're going to oppress you and we're going to continue that, perpetuate that, right? And so the reason why would the West do this, it's because of the surplus they earn. So they earn a surplus on the so they take the natural resources, right? And then they have factories or wherever, they develop those and they sell back goods to Africa, right? So that's how they make that surplus. But because the West doesn't have natural resources to the extent that Africa does, if Africa was able to manufacture its own goods, well, then it wouldn't need the West for anything. And that would put the West in an economic wreck. And they could not have that. So there's this perpetuation of oppression that is happening today. And some people will say, well, the World Bank, I think majority rulers of the World Bank is, the US. They'll say, oh, it doesn't apply to Britain, which is a lie. And let me just break this down. White supremacy has reigned for 500 years. They make it seem as though they've been reigning for thousands and thousands of years. It's only been 500 years, with the white supremacist empires. And it was first the Dutch Empire, 150 years, the British Empire, 150 years, and the American Empire, the 150 years. Now, Bretton Woods, right? Very important conference in New Hampshire, which was put together by the British, after World War II, and they came together and they said, not by the British though, but happened in America. They came together and they said, look, right, not only were they going to make the dollar, that's when they pegged the dollar to gold, made the dollar international standard. What happened at that time after World War II is most countries in Europe had been affected by the war, so they had all this destruction. But the reason why America could rise to superpower is because America didn't have any destruction. And so at the end of the day, my point is, at Bretton Woods, they made an agreement that America would help redevelop Europe, right? And so what I'm saying here is that even though the power shifted after World War II from the UK to America, there was this sort of solidarity in white supremacy that, we're going to make sure the white race prevails. And I have a documentary on my channel called The Great Divide. And in that documentary, it reveals how white supremacy was created. Again, white people are not inherently evil, contrary to what some of these movements try to push by, galvanizing white people to believe that everybody's up against them. No, white supremacy was created because of capitalism and the need to develop, right? And so because of that need to develop capitalism, white supremacy was a tool. And specifically, go watch the documentary, I break it down, right? And so to that point, this idea that, look, we're going to continue serving the white race because it helps really the 1% of us. And when you really look at it, when you really look at capitalism, it doesn't even help most white people. I mean, okay, it helps white people disproportionately more than other races. But how am I walking around in the West and there are homeless people on the street with all the destruction and all the greed and all the oppression the West, these capitalistic nations have caused on other countries? There is no reason why anybody in America should be poor, but there are poor white people. There are poor people in general, right? So it just shows that this system of white supremacy really only was designed to help the 1%. And even just to even like go drive that point home, in the podcast Seeing White, they break down how, you know, at a certain period of time, I believe it was after the slave trade, Black people and poor white Americans started getting along, and they had to ensure that, you know, the 1% had to ensure that's not going to happen. Because if they start getting along, all the poor people start getting along, they can revolt against the leaders of white supremacy or the leaders of capitalism. And so they made sure there was this segregation and separation in the system, so on and so forth. But either way, point is, when they talk about the history, and I'm not saying that anybody should wipe away those histories. Those histories are vicious, those histories are terrible, and absolutely there should be reparations for that. But when he dismisses it just as it's a historic thing, as if it's not happening today, as if it's not proliferating today, that is where there's a massive issue. All right, let's keep going.
I don't really get what that achieves.
We should learn from lessons of the past. We can't change anything, and we should move forward. But the Queen's greatest achievement, his mother's greatest achievement, was the Commonwealth of Countries. She was very proud of that. I think if she could beam her down now, she would say, my Commonwealth. That should survive intact into the King's reign. So he should do whatever he can. Now, bear in mind, I've known this man for a very long time.
Yeah.
He has a voice. And he will say what he feels.
Here's the real problem he's got. There's another voice yapping away about racism. Two voices. His son Harry and Harry's wife Meghan, who for 3 years have branded the royal family a bunch of callous racists. That is now turning up in these polls because, understandably, frankly, Black people in the Commonwealth around the world are going, whoa, really? They're racist?
He's such an idiot. Oh, really? No, we're not like really. We know that they're racist. We're not really, it's not a really situation. We're not surprised by that. It was just a confirmation of what we already know. But the people that want to deny the reality, like him, I really think he's on some sort of retainership from the royal family.
These people, and yet they haven't produced a shred of evidence for any of it.
You and I know the royal family.
How about the blood diamonds that you're walking, you're going to parade down the aisle in the coronation? How about the, oppression that you perpetuate? What have you even done? What have you accomplished in your life?
And we are not racist. And you and I know that they pressed the racist button on the Oprah Winfrey show.
Yeah.
And they never apologized to the Queen.
Never.
She went to her grave.
They should apologize to the Queen. They should apologize to the Queen. Can you imagine the audacity? The audacity. This is white supremacist notion that I will deny, deflect, distract you from the realities of my racism, right? That's part of their propaganda. And you should apologize to me because it doesn't even exist. White supremacy is a hoax. It doesn't exist.
Wow. Thinking there was a racist in the royal family.
And after she died, they said...
What happened? We didn't say that, the press said that.
We didn't mean to say it was racism.
Why didn't you correct it, Harry? Why didn't you tell your...
Well, we know why, because it made them... They weaponized racism and mental health to make themselves extremely rich.
I totally...
All right, come on. This is my problem. This has always been my problem with this racism narrative that these two have spun without any evidence, is that people around the world, particularly people of colour, they believe it.
Because it's true. Because it's true.
They're hearing the first person who wasn't a white royal bride say they're racist, these people. So then the damage is palpable, it's tangible, and it will lead, I think, if we're not careful, to a load of these countries becoming republics, and the beginning of the end of the monarchy.
The end of white supremacy is what he's talking about. What is the problem with a country being independent? You get to be an independent nation, sovereign, but other countries being independent, oh no, that's a problem, because our mark as in Britain is going to diminish, which it already has. Like let's face it, the only thing that's making Britain survive is the US's grasp on or solidarity because of white supremacy. Let that go, and the UK does not have anything going for it.
Thank you for your soliloquy.
No, thank you.
All right, no problem. So first and foremost, my feelings on the royal family and racism are not predicated on Harry and Meghan's willingness to identify it. That's the difference between me and you. We are talking about a country that was built off of racism, and we are referring to the oldest institution in this country that started it all. So that's the first thing. In terms of why black people and many others feel the way that we do, well, the monarchy is a symbol of white supremacy. Okay,
Facts.
White supremacy. That is the reason. Let me.
Not just the symbol of it, the pinnacle of it. The last standing white monarchy that is respected and was the head of the. Oh yeah, I know there are other monarchies, but they're not relevant. They're irrelevant. But the British royal family, who colonized the world and caused a lot of the conflicts that are happening in the world today, from Palestine, in Africa. This all stems from the British Empire. So
why does it make any difference if King Charles says sorry, or why does it make if he pays money? What difference does that make?
What difference does that make? Okay, so when you already heard what I said about the Confessions of an Economic Hitman and the breakdown about how the West currently oppresses other countries, forces them into these, contracts, or these loan agreements that prevent them from developing their own country so they can earn money on the surplus. And this is what they did in colonization, right? Go read the book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, right? So a lot of these systems that they placed in colonization, they wanted to pretty it up. And so they hid it behind World Bank loans, IMF loans. They hid it behind institutional aid. But this aid are debt traps. And the irony of white supremacy is the propaganda that is used to villainize like a country like China. China is, with the Belt and Road Initiative, is developing over 100 countries, giving them infrastructure, giving them power, putting them in the position so they can develop their nations. And why is this a threat to America and the UK? Why is this a threat to the West? Because if those countries are developed, they can no longer buy back the surplus of manufactured goods from the America and the UK. So this is the system. This is the system, how it works together. And so this claim that what difference does it make? Because you can walk in your house. I know that South Africa just bailed the UK out of, a winter with no electricity or with load shedding, right? South Africa just bailed. That's the colonial clutches working again. But there are literally countries that don't have these things because of the oppression set in place. And let me also include this element, how the systems that was set in place, by the British government in Nigeria, for example, to pay expats or white people 100, 200 times more than they pay in Nigeria. That's a system that was set in place then. It's still proliferating today. And through these systems, these things are still happening. So there's a lot that the UK is responsible for in today's world. I want to play a video, but I'm going to play, oh, damn, am I going to be able to do that? I want to play a video that I saw, but let me continue. Oh, hell no. What the hell is this? No ad. Oh, gosh.
The main challenge with manual tax entry is that it takes an extraordinary amount of time. When I found
Okay, so reparation.
How does that combat racism?
No, it actually does. So let me.
The guy hasn't got a racist bone in his body.
Doesn't have a racist bone. And how does it combat racism? Economic empowerment, black economic empowerment. There's a systematic. I really want to play this video. You know what? Let me play it. Let me find it so I can play it for y'all, so you guys can understand the extent of what white supremacy really does in the world, and the denial, the deflection, the perpetuation of the mastery of it, everything. It's just so disgusting and sick, twisted, all of the above.
So I must thank the Critical Collective again for inviting me. I thought they never would after the last bad thing that I said. I must have upset lots of people, I'm sure. Every time I make a presentation, I upset lots of people, but never the Critical Collective, so we must be thinking alike. I congratulate them, really. It's amazing to see so many people here. And I also congratulate scholars for linking again with Critical Collective. It's been some time, and I hope this partnership continues and flourishes, because this is just amazing to see the number of people. I have to apologize for two things. The first is I have to apologize in advance. I'm not an expert on Africa. What I'm going to offer you, perhaps it's not enough, but it's some commonsensical observations. I hope it's common sense. But sometimes it's better not to be an expert, you know, to be able to see things from slightly afar. The second thing is I'm wearing the wrong trousers. Yes, or now China, it's always of the advanced countries. Some charts and a couple of tables, just to paint a little bit of a picture that you already know. Okay, so what this presentation is fundamentally designed to say is this. Africa historically, sub-Saharan Africa, has been fundamental to the global prosperity of the advanced countries. Okay? And Africa had a role to play. It has a role as a raw material producer. We will not allow sub-Saharan Africa to escape that. Okay, we do everything to keep sub-Saharan Africa where it is, also impoverished. It's absolutely vital for the prosperity of everyone else. So let's get clear about that. Okay, and this means all the economic structures, all the global institutions, and the economics we teach everyone is all designed to keep Africa exactly where it is. And whether it is Europe or US or now China, it's always the same. We need Africa to be impoverished because we need those raw materials and we need them dirt cheap. Okay, so that's the message. It doesn't mean to say that there's nothing Africans can do. Of course there is. Okay, but this is the opposition that they're fighting. This is what it's about. Because if Africa does do something different, I assure you living standards of all those in Europe and North America and Asia is going to fall. Okay? And that is a big price to pay. I assure you that the West is not going to allow that without a big fight. Okay, so this is what it's fundamentally about. What I want to show you is how these structures are operating. It's just 20 minutes, so we can't do very much.
I mean, I definitely advise go watch the rest of that video. He breaks it down in a way that really lets you understand the systems of oppression that proliferate today, that the West, the white supremacist movement utilizes, and then the denial, the deflection that they pay out to media organizations to, you know, disillusion you, to make you think, you know, this is not true, this is a lie, it's a hoax, you know, like Tucker Carlson says. But let's keep going.
More for racism than any public figure in the country. Why should he be paying for the sins of people hundreds of years ago?
Imagine
Okay,
the
so can I
audacity.
finish?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Hundreds of years
So,
ago.
the monarchy is a symbol of white supremacy, which is what black people have had to contend with for the last 400 years, notwithstanding the fact that Elizabeth, or every king and queen, from Elizabeth I.
You think
to
the
William
last
IV.
late
Let me
queen
finish,
was a
Piers. I
model
just
of
asked
white
you.
supremacy?
Let me finish.
Of course.
Just ask me several questions. Let me finish.
Well,
my
answer
point.
the question,
Right,
then.
I'm getting there, so just finish.
And that's what he's doing. He's really an agent for white supremacy, because the way he's trying to cut her off, basically muffle her voice, choke, you know, keep her quiet, silence her. Why bring her on your platform? I know he does. This is his style of interviewing people, but he's really just interrupting every word in there, combating it in there, because, I mean, he must be getting a really big check from the royal family, if you ask me. But let's keep
Let
going.
us finish, okay?
Hurry up.
So,
Hurry up. Hurry up.
every
Did you
king-
guys hurry up when you were colonizing people for 500 years? Did you hurry up? There's 500 years of history to go through. What are you talking about for you to make ignorant, stupid statements? And then one of the worst tools of white supremacy is part of the denial is the refusal for the teaching of Black history. You know, I grew up in the UK. I went to school in the UK from a young age. Also schooled in America. I tell you, I kid you not, the only time I ever learned Black history was not in the UK ever. But I did learn it for 1 month in America during Black History Month. That's it. I've never, and so I had to go and learn it after, like, years after university, maybe like 2 or 3 years after university. I started making a documentary on African history, and that's when I started learning African history. So so they've already won by omitting the history from the curriculum. And even in America, the history that you learn is the history that begins in slavery to put you in this sort of oppressed mindset, to let you think, oh, you're nothing. But just go read the book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Africa was thriving before Europe came. And Africa is so big and vast. Different regions had points of time when they were extremely successful, like the Benin Empire, the Egyptian, obviously we know Egypt, the Ethiopian Empire. There's so many other, the Nubian Empire. There's so many empires that were very successful when the Europeans were in the Dark Ages, bathing in feces. And, so that's what's funny to me, because they've only been successful for 500 years. And so this narrative is just ridiculous. But let's keep going.
Queen from Elizabeth I, William IV, has supported and profited off of slavery. So this is about the fact that this country was built off of racism, and that's
This
the
country
point.
also
Wait, hold on a
led...
second. This
Hang on,
country
you can't just keep
stems
talking.
from... No, because I haven't even finished my point.
You
Piers.
can't just
keep
make
interrupting.
outlandish
You
statements
keep
about our royal family and not
interrupting.
expect me to jump in.
Piers, you keep interrupting. Can I finish my point?
This country also led the world out of slavery.
Okay,
So this is the lie that they love to use with the British. The British Empire are the worst. What you think America has done is nothing compared to what Britain has done in slavery. Yet they push this propaganda, this false narrative, and I want to get it accurately. There was this piece that came out that this rating that said Britain is the least racist country in Europe. Some like silly propaganda. This article that they're pushing, New King's College London study found that the UK is amongst the least overall racist countries. So this sort of mainstream propaganda to make you think that white supremacy ended in the UK. But Britain's greatest tool, in fact, not only are they're not, okay, whilst the Portuguese are the ones that invented white supremacy, right? With Henry the Navigator, go watch my documentary, The Great Divide, I break it down for you. Britain made it mainstream. Britain made it, was the most successful and productive with it. And the way that Britain, Britain abolished slavery in the 1800s in England, but they still had plantations in multiple other countries in the Caribbean. They were still oppressive, in Africa, Nigeria, in Ghana, other African countries, South Africa. Colonization, don't forget the apartheid, regime that happened in South Africa just ended in the 90s. So they're trying to deny, like, oh, this thing was hundreds of years ago. Oh, blah, blah, blah. So Britain have been the most vicious. Okay, the Spanish too were not bad. Let's not even compare who was the most vicious. That's a silly argument. They were all vicious because they all worked together under white supremacy and the white supremacist agenda, right? So this lie that they like to perpetuate is so disgusting, that Britain is not a racist country or whatever nonsense, right? Just because, sure, I mean, look, the people in Britain, because they colonized so many places around the world, they had more exposure to people around the world, and there was a level of tolerance for the everyday person. But don't be confused with when the average British person is not racist, that does not reflect the 1%. Because remember what I told you earlier, the systems of white supremacy It's the 1% that control it. It's the 1% that created it. It's the 1% that oppress. So just because the population of people might not be as racist as the French or as any other people, anyway, the 1% are extremely racist, and the systems at place are extremely racist. Right? So like there's so many people that, you know, they had to leave. They studied in the UK. They had to leave because you can't get a job, right? It's not as inclusive as America. There's no affirmative action in the UK. So they're not going to hire you. And it's very hard for them to hire people, you know, or even to, you know, give you any level of upward mobility. But that's another conversation. Whew. Anyway.
Can I finish my point?
A long time ago.
Can I finish my point?
Yes.
Ignorance.
Perfect.
So
So,
please finish it.
I
See?
will. No,
Trying to rush her. How can you trying to rush her, silence her? He's just acting like an agent of white supremacy.
no problem, just be patient. So, every single king and queen from Elizabeth I to William IV over a 270-year
You just
period
said this.
supported
See?
the enslavement of Africans and profited as a result. So it
Yeah.
doesn't, it doesn't
And
take
this
any
country-
genius, hold on a second, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that this country was built off of racism and it stems from white supremacy, all of which is directly attributed to the crown, slavery and colonialism. To answer
you
your
now-
point, let me finish.
You can't.
See, trying to force her to rush her thing. This is not a conversation that's going to be rushed. And you know what? I'm just happy at the end of the day, the death of white supremacy is happening. The British Empire, the light is dimming. The royal family, it's over. What's his name? William is not going to be king. Watch. It's not going to happen. I doubt that what's his name will finish. It will finish in his lifetime. That shit is over. Watch.
My
Just
point.
keep talking.
Piers, you keep interrupting.
Answer my question.
Let's have a conversation.
Answer my question.
Let's have a
We need
conversation. You spoke
mediation
about
here,
slavery.
guys.
You spoke about slavery. Let me answer let me answer the point.
I asked you a specific
Let's-
question.
I want to
Why
answer
should
the point.
King Charles
Let me answer the
be
point.
either
Let me
apologising
answer the point.
for what happened centuries ago?
What happens today? See the denial and the ignorance. It's happening today.
Okay, let me
Or
answer the point.
paying money for it?
Okay, so what you're talking about is slavery. I'm not talking about slavery. Slavery can be traced back to Europe. The Greek slave trade, to be specific, in 400 BC, then the Roman Empire, and then we get to the Muslim conquest of 7th century.
And
Vikings,
black
late
people
18th
had slaves
So what
too,
we're talking about,
right?
exactly. So I'm not talking about slavery.
This is what, oh my God, I just literally had this argument. They like to conflate it and confuse you because they start talking about slavery, and slavery has existed since the beginning of humanity. We're not talking about slavery, we're talking about white supremacy. It's a completely different thing. Sure, slavery was a tool for white supremacy, but when you talk about slavery, ever since the beginning of mankind, there have been slaves. So we're not talking about slavery, we're talking about the systems of white supremacy.
It comes in
I
many
am not
forms.
talking about
There is a lot of slavery
Well,
around
yeah, so-
today.
So I'll tell you what I'm talking about. I'm talking about colonialism, neo-colonialism, racism, racial
Yeah.
disparities, and the racist system of oppression and exploitation of black people and white supremacist attitudes,
Yes.
which have been rebanded under the
What's
guise
that got to
That's
do
what
with
I'm
King
talking about.
Charles?
I'm telling you why he needs to apologise and pay reparations.
What did he
It's not got
do?
anything to do with slavery.
Wow.
Slavery
What
is an
did he
element.
do?
I'm telling you, colonialism, neo-colonialism,
He didn't do
racism,
that.
racial disparities, and a racist system of white supremacist attitudes. That is the legacies of the crown, slavery, and colonialism that
understand.
still remains
I
to this day.
understand.
Let me finally get my point across. Lord, you
You've
need
got
to
your
let me
point
finish.
across.
she
Here's
hasn't.
my point, my counterpoint to you. What's any of that got to do with King Charles?
Okay, so
Just the denial, deflection. I've already explained to God all the stuff I have played already. If I have not explained what it has to do with King Charles,
Who actually has been, I think, one of the great standard bearers in royal history for
an idiot.
actually promoting
What?
racial
How-
equality.
Piers, how much are they paying you? How much are they paying you? Why on earth do you talk about Meghan and Harry every week on your show? Every single week when nobody else is talking about them. What does your retainership look like? How much are they paying you?
in tackling racial
Okay,
injustice.
so let me
And yet you
explain.
want him to be issuing grovelling apologies for people hundreds of years ago,
So let me
and you
explain.
want him to pay money.
Okay, so I think black people would be far more inclined to get over it if it wasn't for the fact that the legacies of the crown, slavery, and colonialism still remain, which includes racism, racial disparities, and the racist global system of oppression and exploitation of black people. Which
All right, you're not
I'm telling
answering my
you
question.
about.
Tessa.
Oh my God, the denial. Okay, let's be specific. Go back. Let's be specific. I mean, I feel like I'd be repeating myself. I've given you guys the tools. I've told you guys the books to read as the evidence.
But you don't want to accept it.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
You haven't explained
You
what
also have the wealth of
what's that got to do
economic
with King
expansion
Charles?
as a result of exploitation of black people.
Let
And you also have
let
British
Tessa
global-
speak now.
Hold on. You haven't even let me finish, Piers. No problem. No problem.
You've
I've
done,
No,
you've
there's
done
a problem.
9/10 of the talking.
No, you didn't.
Well, she should have 9/10 of the talking. She should, because it's not your people, Piers, that have been oppressed.
You didn't let me.
I
You've
wonder.
heard the debate.
I think you're both wrong.
And she hasn't even done 9/10 of the talking. I'm looking at this. I'm 7 minutes in, right? She started around 3 minutes, and so I mean, but he interrupted her most of the time. He didn't interrupt the other people. The other guy.
On the one hand, we celebrate, and you certainly do, Piers, the idea of monarchy as continuity.
Yeah.
Going way back when. I mean, I read an article this week that traced the anointing oils to the Old Testament and King Solomon. You can't pick and choose which bits of that continuous historic line you like.
Yes, I can.
Well,
How is that that I'm
you
wrong?
can, but it's hugely,
But how is that
wrong?
problematic.
How is that wrong? What are you
And I
talking
would
about?
counter to you, where we have the face of history and the physical form of history in our royal family.
White supremacy,
When,
that's what
for
I'm talking
example,
about.
France, the Republic, outlawed slavery much later, and in the civil wars in America,
keep
that's what
talking
it took
about
in
slavery.
America,
Let me tell
much
you.
later. So
You keep
my
talking
point
about
is, no, two
slavery.
seconds.
Hang on.
Let me finish my
The denial, like I've given you guys the histories. They did not abolish it much later. These lies and propaganda. I'll repeat myself. It ended in the UK, but they continued till the 1900s in what do you call it? In the Caribbean, and then in Africa, colonization. Do you know the conditions of colonization? So it's not even as though like, you have to read the book How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, right? And the systems of colonization. And for example, I'll give you one, excerpt from the book, or one explanation in the way that the mining system worked, and how, in the UK, and I learned a lot about, British history, especially in that period from the 1700s all the way up to the 1900s, and how the poor were oppressed. Capitalism has never served, the average white person. So how the average person was oppressed and was, just disgraced, treated like trash. Classism is a huge thing in the UK historically. And I learned a lot about, how, they were treated in factories, how there was child labor, how they used like little kids as for the canaries, a canary in the mine. When the canary dies, that, oh shit, like it's toxic, so I have to get out of here. But the mining conditions in the UK were so inhumane and so unacceptable that there were all these sorts of riots and unions that sort of like pushed for the end of that. And that was 1800s, 1900s. But let me tell you something. They also had mines in Africa, and they treated black people 100 times worse than they treated even white people in the mines in the UK. Listen to how I describe the mines in the UK, the coal mines, and how they treated them like shit. They treated the Africans worse. In addition to that, they paid, and I remember in the UK, the mine workers were paid disgustingly low salaries. They still paid them 100 times more than the black ones. This is in Nigeria, right? Go read the book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. So this denial that, oh, well, okay, sure, slavery ended, but then you transition that into colonization, which is another system of oppression. Now colonization ended, now you've transitioned it, and the only reason why they're ending these things is because of technology and access to information. So they've changed from colonization to these debt traps that are presented as aid. But the irony is that they will call the Chinese investments debt traps when theirs are debt traps.
My point is,
See, you want to interrupt, but you interrupted me several times, Piers. I see
You
your
did all the
hypocrisy.
talking.
I see your hypocrisy right now. It's fine. I did all the talking.
I think
You
what
kept
you do,
interrupting me.
what we're doing here is
Let
we're
her speak.
conflating an individual
Back at you.
family with institutions of state.
And that's actually another argument, right? since they don't have any power in the in the operations, which since they don't have that, why should they even exist? They're useless. Spending apparently between 100 million and 250 million pounds on the coronation for somebody that's not even relevant to the state.
You can't expect a king to apologise. He doesn't have that power. He would have to be told to apologise by the government because it's an institution of state.
First of all, apology is not what we want. That's not, no. Bring out the checkbook. That's what we want, the reparations. And the reparations starts with stopping the debt traps. I feel like we're almost asking for the wrong thing, right? We want reparations, but let's start with stopping the debt traps that keep Africa poor. Let's start with that.
All right.
He's talked about sorry.
Excuse me. Time out. Time out.
You keep talking about slavery. Let's just be clear about slavery. Yes, you did end slavery. You've made that point and you've made that point, so let me address it. You did end slavery, and there was a clause in the contract that said, for example, that Jamaicans had to work up to 45 hours a week for the following 4 years, whilst you simultaneously paid off the slave owners and left the enslaved and their countries to rot. And then you transitioned to colonialism, where slavery still continued, and then you transitioned to the Commonwealth, where you continue to assert your dominance, exploit black people, and do it in a far more dignified way.
I wish she wasn't rushing. Take her time to explain, because we can't hear her, and then now acting like she's crazy or whatever. Who cares? I mean, who cares what they think?
Nobody's refuting.
Can we all stop talking?
Nobody's refuting the repugnance of that.
Can we please time out? The biggest problem with slavery right now is there are between 7 to 10 million slaves in India. Last time I looked, that is not as a result of white supremacy.
Why are we talking about India? What does that have to do with this conversation? I mean, sure, they had colonization in India too, but this is why they do this thing. They lean into the conversation around slavery so they can talk about the fact that slavery has always existed, and you have to remove that conversation. The spotlight is not on slavery. The spotlight is not on the sort of ingredients of it. The spotlight is on white supremacy. Always, whenever you're having these arguments, stare back to white supremacy and the systems of white supremacy, because it was designed to make you think it's a hoax. It was designed to deny, deflect, and be almost like how they describe the devil. How the devil is, the claim that the devil, if you believe in the devil, is designed to make you think it doesn't exist. That's exactly what white supremacy is. So when these people try to deflect and start talking about slavery, right, you take the microscope back to white supremacy. Don't even engage in the conversation about slavery. Don't even engage unless you're pulling an example of it. Colonization is easier, right? Because that's more specific. But really, you want to be talking about the systems of white supremacy, and you really want to be focusing hard on the systems at place today, not 100 years ago. Focus on that, and what can they say to that?
Causing modern day slavery. I would rather we expend all our energy on current slavery issues than going back in the past, as we now do we now go back in the past for everything, wallowing in self-guilt about stuff that had nothing to do with us. Paul,
yes. Legacies, you ignored that conveniently. Legacies of the crown slavery and colonialism, you ignored that conveniently.
This is such a negative.
Legacies going back. How
it's so negative. Can you imagine? Think about the negativity that the British Empire has inflicted on the world, and now it's so negative. Oh no. Let's just I don't want to hear, oh no, I don't want to talk about this. Think about the privilege that is to not want to talk about it, when today there are people that are literally suffering. People need to read up on the legacy of white supremacy.
How far do you want to go back?
400 years black people have been consenting.
Okay, so I want... So do you think the Vikings should be paying me money for what they did to me?
See, you're talking about slavery. I am not. I would explain
I'm not talking about slavery.
I'm talking about colonialism,
You're not listening to me,
racism and racial disparities that still contend...
Stop shouting. You're not listening to what I said.
You're not...
He's the one that his voice is louder than her. She was even whispering.
Listen to me.
Should the Vikings and the Romans also, through their modern day ancestors, be paying me reparations for what they did to my family?
He's an idiot. idiot, ignorant.
It's not slavery. You're not listening to me.
Yes, I am.
The Vikings and Romans didn't make us slaves.
No, yes, you're talking about the Roman Empire, which included
No,
slavery.
I'm talking about the Romans and the Vikings coming over here and causing immeasurable harm to my ancestors.
An empire and slavery.
Should
And that was so much longer ago.
Norwegians be paying me reparations?
In one sentence, Iman, in one sentence.
Go ahead.
What do you want? In one sentence.
Reparation.
See how they bombarded her with 3 white people that are obviously ignorant about, you know, the legacy of their, not just their legacy, but the current affairs of, white supremacy. They're so ignorant to it, and so they can just continue to deflect.
Thank you, Tessa.
You want money?
You want money?
You want money? Okay. Then I want money from the Vikings and the Romans. Paul,
I think
Paul, be very patient.
No, but the Commonwealth is a force for good.
Yes,
Some
really?
countries, yes, it is. They do
absolutely
they work for each other. It's a family, a community of families.
Oh my God, you idiot! Oh my God, these idiots. Oh, anyway, I'm just happy to know that it's coming to an end, right? And that's part of the propaganda. I'm gonna have, oh God, with Charles talking about inclusion and diversity.
That help each other. That's why it was formed. And
no, you benefit more. That's why it's formed.
no, we don't benefit more. They benefit as well. They do benefit.
How?
Of course they do.
How?
Yes, they do.
How?
I'm not saying that they don't. What I'm saying
How?
is that we
How do they benefit?
You benefit.
Everyone
more.
benefits.
Exactly.
How?
All right.
You benefit.
Iman,
you benefit.
Iman,
you benefit more.
Iman,
That's white supremacy.
Iman, how much money do you want from me?
That's what I keep talking about.
How much money do you want from
the
me?
National Commission on Reparation said that Jamaica, for example, is
How much do you want from me?
1.2 trillion.
How much do you want from me?
It's not about my feelings and not from you. I'm not. This isn't about me. And
We've all got to chip in, right? So how much do you want? How much money could I give you for something that had nothing to do with
He's
me?
a bloody
right?
idiot.
How much money could I give you to make racism better? Nothing
Keep ignoring
is
that
the answer.
conveniently. We're talking
He's a
about the
bloody
legacies of the
fool.
Crown slavery and colonialism, which includes racism.
All right. I don't know why you've come on deciding to speak like a robot today, but it's not really working.
Because you don't listen. That's
Okay,
why.
but nor does talking to me like that. Doesn't work.
Okay, well,
right?
how about listening?
But I will happily
how about
pay
listening?
if you could convince me that it will change racism 1 iota in this country. I will pay you a check for the
You can't
damage
pay
inevitably that was
anything.
done
You
by
don't have money. What are you talking about? Well, how you have a couple $1 million in your account? You don't have money. What are you talking
my
about?
relatives, when they weren't being attacked by Vikings and Romans,
An idiot.
I will pay you reparations if I think you have any argument for why.
Okay, that's enough of his nonsense. He's so annoying. So yeah. So just on the topic of the end of this is how the UK is responding to Prince Charles, because nobody wants him. Nobody wants him anyway. So it's all coming to an end. Goodbye.
We are days away from the coronation of King Charles. The Union Jack is everywhere, on houses, on public buildings, and even on clothes. But another banner has been popping up as well. Maybe not as visible, but still important. The Not My King banner. I'm talking about these yellow posters. They follow King Charles everywhere he goes. Along with the posters, there are protests and loud boos. But the biggest one is scheduled for Coronation Day. Around 1,000 Republicans are expected to hit the streets. They want to spoil the King's party, to end the monarchy and replace it with an elected head of state, like here in India. The question is, how powerful are they? Some numbers first. Around 58% of Britons back the monarchy. That number was 75% 10 years back, so the popularity is coming down, but a majority still support it. Around 29% of the Britons say that monarchy is quote-unquote very important. Important for what? God knows, but that's what Britons say. But among the British youth, the number is much lower. In the 18 to 34 group, only 12% think that the monarchy is very important. As for the coronation, people don't really care. Only 9% Britons think it's a big deal. Many royal lovers see the coronation as an opportunity, a chance to reshape the monarchy. Ironically, the Republicans also think it's an opportunity, not to reshape, but to abolish the monarchy. And their trump card is the king himself. Charles is not his mother. That's something most royalists and Republicans agree on. Queen Elizabeth II ruled for 70 years. For millions of Britons, she was a constant part of their life. She was queen when they were born. She was queen when they died. Charles, though, is a different story. He had a failed marriage. He admitted to adultery. And his younger son, Harry, is leading a rebellion against the monarchy. Plus, the timing of the coronation could not have been worse. The UK's inflation is in double digits. There is a war raging in Europe, not the ideal time to spend public money on an outdated ritual. So Republicans feel their time has come. They're using social media to push their message. Hashtag Not My King is trending on most days. Their tweets have thousands of likes and retweets, but chances are it won't be enough. Not because Britons simply can't live without the monarchy, but because many of them don't really care. It's not love that's keeping the monarchy alive, it's the indifference. And I'll tell you why. The leaders of Scotland and Wales are against the monarchy. They do not want a king or queen, but the main political parties in England are okay with it. That's the Conservatives and the Labour Party. As long as mainstream parties do not bother, the monarchy cannot be abolished. And you can't blame them. Imagine you're the Prime Minister of Britain. Who would you prefer as the head of state? An elected leader with political clout, or a lame duck monarch who can only say yes to you?
Anyway, I just wanted to show you guys that they are growing more and more irrelevant every day. I think they should turn Buckingham Palace into an Airbnb. Leave a comment down below. Would you like book Buckingham Palace as an Airbnb? Or maybe a museum? Some of the palaces should be turned into a museum. Yeah, I definitely think, in the next 50 years, it's going to be a wrap. So can't wait to see that. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. What do you think? Do you agree with Piers's ignorance? Have I given you sufficient research to look into to learn a little bit more about what white supremacy is doing today, and not the past, but let's focus on today, what they're doing. Am I giving you enough information? Do you want more information? Do you guys have more stuff that you can tell me and educate me? Leave a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts. You're watching the Kenim O Show, and I'm your host, Kenim O, and I'll see you next time. A peace.